Dave Meros from the great brand new progressive rock band Pattern Seeking Animals. Dave, how's your day?
Pretty good. Going good so far. Good to be talking to you again.
Same thing, same here. Pattern Seeking Animals will be releasing its first album on July 4th. It is self-titled. First, I'm curious, how did you come up with the band, like the name itself, Pattern Seeking Animals?
John heard that term. I think he read it in a book he was reading, or he heard it somewhere, and he just thought it was a really cool term. Um, there was a Spock's Beard song on our last Spock's Beard record that had that phrase in it, and yeah, he just really liked it, and he thought it would be an appropriate band name, which it is. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of a cool thing to think about, and it just kind of, it was his idea.
It's nearly impossible to talk about pattern-seeking animals and not mention Spock's Beard, which you just did. Yourself, Jimmy Keegan, Ted Leonard are from the Spocks, while John Boeghold, do I pronounce
Big,
it right?
yeah, I don't know what it would be in its official European pronunciation, but in America we just say big hold.
Boeghold.
Yeah.
He's been around the band for numerous, like producing, writing, arrangements, responsibilities. How did you guys decided to form up a brand new band, and what was the initial philosophy?
Well, after the last Spock's record, John had a couple songs left over that didn't make it onto the album, and he had another couple ideas that he was working on, and he had some studio time, and he brought Jimmy in to play real drums on it because that's always a lot better than sitting at the computer doing the drums.
Yep.
And so the songs turned out really good, and then he just, well, John said, well, I can't sing very well. I'm going to see what it's like for Ted to sing and Dave to play bass on it. And then it was bam, it sounded like a cool band. And by that time, he had more songs written. And then he realized that they had an album's worth of stuff. And he just goes, well, let's just keep recording. Let's just do this. Make it an album, and then see if anybody wants to have it. And Inside Out was interested in it. So it started off just as kind of a personal project for him to just record some ideas he had, and then it worked its way into being more of like a signed deal in a band situation.
So
Unintentional band.
okay, yeah. So from my understanding, it's not a concept album. It's all unrelated tracks, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So John wrote most of the songs with some help from yourself, Ted Leonard, on a few tracks with the
Yeah.
lyrics. What
Uh-huh.
about the music itself? Did you guys participate in writing like the melodies or?
Well, the two songs that I co-wrote with John were my contributions were musical, because I've never written lyrics ever in my
Right.
life. I'm completely unable to do that. Um, so there was one song, "No One Ever Died and Made Me King." That was an idea that we've been kicking around for really a long time, years, and we presented it to Spock's Beard in different forms two or three times, and it never fit in with any record that we were doing. And John kind of rewrote it again a little bit, spruced it up, maybe mainly production stuff. And he goes, "Damn it, it's going to be on some record sometime in my life." So so that was the one. And then the song, I'm spacing out on the name of it, and I actually am a co-writer, so I should be embarrassed. The last song on the record.
Oh,
uh,
uh, I don't have it near me, but
yeah, let me see. "Stars Along the Way."
yes.
Yeah, that one was about 2 years ago, I guess. I had written a song and presented it to him, and at the time it was maybe 5 or 6 minutes of music, and I gave it to John, and he thought it was something that he could work with, and he expanded it into whatever it is now, 8 minutes or something. He's really good at taking things and expanding them. So yeah, that was my contribution for that. And it was stuff that was, also left over from before. That song, Stars Along the Way, was not taken for the last Fox album. So it started off as pieces that were left behind, kind of.
Yeah.
And yeah, John's really on a roll with writing too. He's been writing constantly. We're almost finished with our second album already.
Wow.
And the first one doesn't even come out for another, what, 4 days.
Yeah.
And he's got, I think, about 40, 45 minutes worth of music with Jimmy's drums already on it, and I'm trying to catch up with bass. I have one big giant long 17-minute bass track to do,
Wow.
and then I'll be caught up with Jimmy. Jimmy's scheduled to go into the studio again on the 21st, I think it is, and cut some more stuff. So John's really in a creative space right now. He's churning it out. It's all really good stuff too.
Superb. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, superb is also the cover of it's absolutely beautiful. Who drew the cover?
oh, that is Thomas Everhard. He works a lot with Inside Out Music. He's done our album covers forever. I think he started doing our album covers maybe on the third or fourth Spock's record. I mean, it's been, 10, 15 years we've been working with him.
Okay.
And yeah, he always comes up with something really great.
Yeah, I really love like the animals and the blue sky, and yeah, it's beautiful. John mentioned that in order for pattern-seeking animal to sound different than Spock's beard, he found himself drawing like on a few different musical influences. Can you name a few of these influences and tell me the difference between the two bands? Like, how do you differentiate the two bands?
Well, like you said earlier, there's going to be some similarities drawn, and just because of Ted's voice, people are going to hear Spock's beard in it, and at some points, a bass tone. Except, I've been using a lot of different bass tones on the pattern-seeking animal stuff. Um, so, in that way, that's one little difference that not too many people will probably notice because it's just bass, and, most people don't even know what bass is, but that's okay. Um, but anyway, he's been drawing maybe less on the Spock's beard thing was always kind of yes and gentle giant, and there's a few things that Spock's beard always was kind of equated for, and I think John is going more in an art rock direction. It's kind of hard to define. I know that some of the songs really remind me. I don't know if you know the term Philly soul. The soul music in the '70s that was coming
Yeah.
out of Philadelphia. He is a really big fan of that, and so am I. Um, and you can hear that, and you could, that would be something that Spock's beard would just say, no, this is not Spock's beard. But everything that was not allowed in Spock's beard is allowed in this, and he gets to follow his own vision for each song, rather than thinking how it would fit into a Spock's beard framework, so there's more freedom for him. And, him playing keyboards is much different than Rio.
Yep.
And Al, of course, Al is one in a million. There's nobody else that can sound like Al. So, having Ted on guitar instead, that's going to be a audible difference. So, I mean, to me, it doesn't really sound like Spock's beard
No,
very
same
much.
here. Yep.
But a lot of people say, well, this is just Spock's beard version 2. But, it's just, I guess it's different people hear different stuff.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to sound like Spock's beard. I mean, our intention is not to try to copy something or replace something, and it's just a completely separate entity.
Good. I know you answered, some of that question already, but if you meet someone for the first time and you need to explain what is pattern-seeking animal, like explain the genre, the type of music, and all that, like how would you do it?
Well, I would just say progressive rock, kind of hearkening back to the term that doesn't get used much anymore, art rock.
Yeah,
I mean, I actually hear bands like Supertramp in this music and things like that. Which so maybe that would be one of the terms I would use.
yeah,
Of course, there's some Yes and Genesis that you can maybe imagine in there. Um, but yeah, maybe a little bit more towards art rock.
yeah,
And there's a lot of melody, strong melodies and musical hooks. Um, it's not hardly any shredding. I mean, it's not. It's different. For me, it's like a massive breath of fresh air because a lot of time, especially in prog rock, it kind of becomes. And I hope I'm not alienating anyone by saying this, but it's almost like music as an Olympic event. I mean, it's just like how good can we play? How complex and mathematical can this get? And I don't know, that's not what I grew up with. And, I like hooks, I like melody, I like songs that kind of groove and settle into something, more of an emotional response rather than a cerebral response. And that's what this band is to me. I like listening to it, and, not just because I'm involved in it, because I just kind of like the music.
yeah. That leads me to my next question. How healthy do you think progressive rock is in 2019? Like, are you happy with the evolution since the 70s?
Well, this is one of those things I could probably do a half an hour on, but
Yes. Yeah.
to try to shorten it way down, the 70s were like the heyday, as we all know. And then it got a little self-absorbed and pretentious, and music changed and people changed. They weren't so open-minded, and it went way down. And in the mid 90s it kind of started coming up a little bit, and we happened to be into that first wave coming back. Um, and progressive rock now is both in a better spot than ever and also in a worse spot than ever. Because the talent, the musical talent, is just astounding now. I mean, there has never been so many virtuoso players in what I would call maybe the rock genre, as opposed to jazz or classical, where all the virtuosos used to be.
Yeah.
And now there's these players that, I mean, they make me feel like I can't even play the simplest nursery rhyme. I listen to these guys. Sometimes I go on YouTube. I think it's just for self-punishment. I just listen to all these players and just go, oh my God, this is so far above what I can do. I can't even, I can't even. I'm just going to take all my stuff out to the yard and set it on fire. But and the bands, there's a lot of great writing, a lot of great everything. I mean, and the internet is allowing everybody to have some kind of exposure. The prog rock audience is bigger than it has been in many, many years, maybe 30 years. In that regards, it's really, really healthy. People are like flocking in and flocking in, and that's creating the other side of the thing. Is like anyone can record a great album and put it on an international platform right now, the internet. So, like, how are you going to emerge? How are you going to get your head above water? It's very hard for bands to do that. At the same time, the music industry is collapsing. I mean, it's in really, really bad shape right now. Bands have a very hard time um, making any money, and it's really not about money, but it is because you have to make enough money to be self-supportive.
Yep.
Not necessarily making a lot of money for yourself but you at least have to make enough money back to feel like it's worth it to continue on. And I think a lot of bands are getting really frustrated because there's no, doors are closing one at a time, and there's nowhere you can turn. You used to be able to make some money on CDs, some money on touring, some money on, four or five different things. And one by one, those doors are kind of closing down. And as you know, being involved in the live side of it,
Yep.
um, bands are, starting to tour more and more and more, or wanting to, and so you don't have as many ticket sales because people can't afford to buy tickets to every show anymore, and
Yep.
it's getting tough to even people, all the bands turn to touring for their income, and now that's kind of closing down, and so that's kind of a little depressing answer I've just given you, but
No,
there is the,
I 100% with your thoughts. That's exactly reality.
yeah, I always tell people that music is becoming kind of like maybe what woodworking was at the turn of the last century. A woodworker making furniture could make a handsome living if he made decent furniture. And now everything's automated, and you can. There's still a lot of great woodworkers, but they just make a couple pieces here and there, sell them maybe to other members of their family or to friends. Have a little website, sell a couple pieces a year. It's not a live. It's a hobby now. It's a passion, not really a vocation as much as it used to be. And I think that's where music is going.
And it's
There's,
sad. Yeah.
yeah, there's the big furniture makers, IKEA or whatever.
Yeah.
There's the big ones, and then a giant gap, and then the people that are just doing it because they want to, and producing a product that's much better than the IKEA stuff. But
Yeah.
you know, I
Well,
don't know. It's just, yeah.
totally with you. Yeah. Due to the complexity of the music, you would more than likely require additional musicians for live performances. Do you already have a live plan, and do you know who these musicians would be?
There have been some names that have been tossed into the hat. We haven't made any plans yet. Um, it's kind of a hard thing to get off the ground because we live in different. Just to rehearse, to get ready for our first gig, we have to come in from different parts of the country,
Yeah.
and there's rehearsal places and hotels, and you know, and so we kind of have to get an offer that'll pay for that initial expense. And we've had a couple gig offers actually, but it's like, man, how are we going to do this? We can't come out of pocket with thousands of dollars just to play the first gig.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to figure it out. And this is kind of complicated by the fact that John doesn't want to do the live stuff. He's never really been a keyboard player in a live situation. He's grew up being a bass player, and he hasn't played gigs, any kind of gigs, in, I don't know. I was in a band with him in the mid and late '80s, and I think that those were the last live gigs that he did. Early, maybe 90, 91. Um,
Would he give
and
it a
so,
try though?
well, no, he'd rather stay home and write music,
Okay.
and a lot of the writing is computer based. He doesn't have a lot of physical keyboards, and a big part of playing live is learning to tame your gear. I
Hmm.
mean, you have to set it all up. Like, you should see Rio before one of our tours. He spends a month learning how to get his keyboards ready for a tour. He's got a little MIDI switcher on the ground, and he's like flicking MIDI control settings, and the keyboard split, and this goes to the computer, and this goes to the piano, and this goes, and it's would be a completely big mountain of gear, learning, training himself how to harness this live thing. And he's actually a really smart guy. He knows, like, I don't want to get into this. I'm not even going to try it. You guys will get a couple other guys and that know it, that have been doing it, that have been down in the trenches. So, yeah.
That's
So
good.
yeah, it's going to take at least two other guys,
Okay.
and we do have some names, but we haven't really settled on anybody. And we're really trying to figure out how we can get to do gigs because this stuff would be very fun to play, and especially live. I think it would just be really engaging for an audience to hear it live. It would be bigger, you know.
I would love to, for sure.
So the fingers are crossed and the wood is being knocked on and whatever else you do for good luck.
So the plan is to, come up with a new album pretty much every year from starting now. Uh, does it still allow you sometimes to work on the Spocksbeard albums, or are you concentrating right now on the new project?
Well, John is definitely concentrating on the new stuff. As far as Spock's Beard, right now, especially not with doing any gigs or something, it's just a recording project, which it's a lot of time for John for the writing, but for the rest of us, we just get sent tracks and we record.
Yeah.
It leaves plenty of time for everything else. And like I said, this thing is not to replace Spock's Beard. It's just everybody in Prague does side projects now, and this is just another one of the. We're just adding our name to the pile, you know.
Dave, your discography is very impressive. What would you say is your career highlight?
Well, I would say Spock's Beard for sure. If I don't know if I could narrow it down to one specific. If I had to narrow it down to one exact point in time or two, as far as recording, it would be during the mixing process of the album Beware of Darkness. We were mixing over at Kevin Gilbert's studio,
Wow.
and he had just finished the mix for Walking on the Wind, and we finished it kind of late, and it was just done. It's like, well, we got to go. It was the project was, I think we're done. Closed it down. The next morning we showed up, and I just go, can I listen to this mix? And so I put on the headphones while the other guys were doing some other stuff and listened to Walking on the Wind. And that moment was just like, oh man, this is, I'm just so proud of being in this band right now.
Wow.
It was one of those situations that just makes you feel like if I could be in any band in the world, I'd be in this band and I am in it. It's like, damn.
Wow.
And another one was a couple of years later after, I think it was when Five had come out. We played a show at the Astoria in London, and it was one of those shows that was just transcendent. I mean, the band, we could not make a mistake. It was just like this perfect show. The sound on stage was huge. It was there was like 900 people there. It was like one of our biggest audiences, and they were just going crazy. And it was just like everything came together, and I felt like I wasn't even standing on the ground. I mean, I felt like I was kind of floating above. And the show was over, and I couldn't even really speak for like 15 minutes. Neil was asking me questions. I was just like, uh, what? And that, those two, of all the bands I've been in, I've done a lot of really cool gigs, very satisfying musical things. Those two moments, and I have a shitty memory. And for those two things to stick in my brain, they had to be really good. So I would say those are the two. And they're both Spock's Beard, so.
I've been listening to Pattern Seeking Animal on repeat for at least a week now. I'm absolutely thrilled that we can expect more music in the near future. I know the new album is not even out. As far as I'm concerned, it's going to be very high on my top 10 album in 2019. Uh, my favorite track is These Are My Things. I love
Yeah?
it. I'm hoping for a video or something because this is a really cool track. And you've already mentioned that you're working on new material, so congratulations. This is good stuff.
Yeah, and then the new stuff too. There's oh man, there's a couple songs on here on the new stuff that are just like unbelievable. I mean, there's a really big long one that's I don't know if I should say the title, but it's called Lifeboat. John said it was one of the longest songs he ever wrote. It's like 17 minutes long, and it's really a good. It's a story, you know, and it just is really great musically and lyrically. Um, that's I always like to hear what people's favorite tracks are because you know some people like said I read a review the other day. It said I really like this album except for maybe These Are My Things. I wasn't too crazy about that one. And so it's like, well, that okay, yeah. And then it's your favorite track, so you never know, you know.
Yeah.
And it would make a great video. I mean, if we could get a budget and do a full-on video of the lyric, the whole story of that song, that would be great. It would be really entertaining. But that was a cool song. That was another one that was not accepted for a Spock's Beard album. Either the last one or the one before. That was one of the spare parts that got rewritten and updated and put on the Pattern Seeking Animals thing.
Before I let you go, I have a few more questions, but they only require one word answers. If you don't
Okay.
want to, if you want to pass, you just say pass, and we'll move on to the next. It's quick. Who's your all-time favorite bass guitar player?
Well, this is more than one word, but I
Yeah,
can't pick. I can't pick a favorite, but let me just pick somebody. Chris Squire. I
can't
mean,
go
I
wrong with
have other favorites. I have other favorites that are completely different dudes, and I like just as much. You know, maybe Rocco Prestia from Tower of Power, or Marcus Miller, or even John Entwistle. You know, here's another one. David Hungate. Not many people even know who he is. He was the original Toto guy, and he played with Boz Scaggs. And that guy, to me, is like the epitome of the perfect bass player. And Tom Hamilton from Aerosmith. You know, you won't hear him being named in anybody's favorite list, but he's fucking great rock bass player. So I've got all these guys. You know, I was James Jamerson Jr. You know, all these not Junior, James Jamerson, Carol Kay. I mean, I like them all maximum. You know, if you get 100 points, they all get 100. So,
yeah. What would be your top one best bass track of all time?
oh man,
I know it's tough.
yeah, I could. Wow, there again, it depends on the genre. Um, well, you know, okay. Hmm. And this is not like I can wait 5 minutes and give you an answer because it's being recorded right now and this is dead air as long as I sit here. So let's say, uh, well, maybe a Yes bass track, Heart of the Sunrise.
A good one?
Yeah, because it evolves so much.
Yeah.
There's different tones, different musical. It's really melodic. It's one of those genius bass tracks
How old were
that.
you when you? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was learning some yes songs for a while, and as I was learning for this thing that I might have done, and th- while I was learning that track, it was just like, oh my God, you don't until you really dig into it, you don't appreciate how good it is. And as I was going over it and learning it, it's like this guy, Chris Squire was always one of my favorites, and he went up like 8 more notches just because of the imagination that went into those parts. So anyway, go ahead.
How old were you when you started playing music?
I was 9 when I started playing. My dad got a piano. I started plunking away on that, and I was about 8 then. But then when I kept showing interest in it, and so I started taking piano lessons and did that for a few years. And I was actually getting pretty good by the time I was 12, 13 years old. I had a really, really good teacher, and I was really going accelerating really fast in piano. But then I got into junior high and high school, and I wanted to be in the band. And then I moved and got a bad piano teacher, and so
Oh,
my whole motivation for piano playing just kind of like diminished. And I started playing brass instruments and played, kind of moved around a little bit in the brass world. And then when I was in college, when I was 20, a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to be in a band, and I would be a bass player. And it's like, what? He goes, come on, man, you can do it. And I really wanted to do it. When you're younger, you're just fearless. It's like, yeah, well, I don't have a bass, and the guitar player had a '63 jazz bass that was just a cream puff, just this beautiful instrument, and he had a bass amp. And it's like, let me at it, come on, please. And so I realized, as soon as I picked it up, I realized that I had actually been a bass player my whole life, and I just didn't know it. I always listened to bass parts, even when I was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old. Listened to Beatles and Monkees and the Stones. I always key on bass parts. So when I actually started playing bass, I had all the bass parts in my head already. I couldn't tell you what the guitar parts were. I can't recite lyrics or anything, but I know bass parts. And so I started playing gigs like a few weeks later. You know, it was one of those situations where I wish I had started earlier in my life playing bass.
one word to describe pattern-seeking animal.
Well, this is 2 words: art rock.
Next one is not easy to answer, but I'm still gonna ask. Do you have a favorite track on the album?
Yeah. Favorite track for me is, I have to look at the song titles. Orphans of the Universe.
Oh,
That one, when I first heard, that's why I don't know the titles. They all have different titles when John's first writing them. That song first started out, his first demo was called Here I Am, or Here We Are, because that's some of the lyrics of the song. And so that's what comes to my head at first. But yeah, that song, first time I heard the demo of it, it's just like, this is special. This is great. It's really unique the way it modulates all over the place, but it doesn't feel like it's modulating all over the place. It just feels really good. It's got great bass lines, great every part. That's my favorite. Yeah.
if you could play any venue in the entire world, which one would you love to play the most?
You know, I don't know. It just depends on everything else around the gig.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the best gig I ever did was that one at London Astoria, which it's a nice big room, but it's not a great venue. And I've played really nice multi-million-dollar restoration theaters before and had horrible shows.
Yeah.
It sounded bad, maybe only 100 people were there or 50 people. And so it's not so much about the place, it's just about the situation, how everything comes together. I like playing medium-sized venues, you know, three, four, 500. Um, that's where I personally have the best time.
Okay.
It's the sound is not too huge. You can hear everything better. You get more immediate reaction from people. That's kind of my personal preference.
And now, if you could play with any musician, dead or alive, who would that be?
Somebody asked me that question a couple months ago, and I couldn't answer it. Um, because, and they thought I was being kind of a dick. It's like, well, like you're so special, you don't need to play with anybody. It's like, no, that's not it at all. It's like if I said Jimi Hendrix, if I played with Jimi Hendrix, it might not be the same as playing with my idea of Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah,
It might be like it might turn out bad. I might just blow it and be so in my own head that I don't enjoy it at all.
but at least you played with Jimi Hendrix.
Right, it would be, I guess, good for the resume, but at my advanced age, I don't even care about my resume anymore. What am I, where am I going to go from here? Um, but but yeah, I don't know. I mean, and to make it even more complicated, I've played and am currently playing with people that I just love playing with, and I might choose. If you could play with anybody in the world, who would you play with? Drummers. Who am I going to choose? Jimmy Keegan, Nick DiVirgilio. And okay, I'm playing with Jimmy all the time now, and I played for 10, 15 years with Nick. So, and Al is like one of the most original, unique. I always equate him to Jeff Beck. There's nobody else that can play like Jeff Beck, really, and there's nobody else that can really play like Al. So he would be in my top list, and all the guys. So I don't know. It's one of those questions. I just get confused. I spin out, say a bunch of stupid stuff like I just did now.
No, it's perfect answer as far as I'm concerned. It's beautiful. My last question for you, Dave. If you can pick any bass guitar in the world, which one would you take?
Oh, see, you're asking me. I'm so weird. I can't just answer questions. Um, I, it depends on the kind of music.
Okay.
Um, like, and I've had love affairs with different kinds of basses. The one that I think is the best bass in the world, I might not even like in a couple of years. Um, I'm kind of schizophrenic that way. Like on this new pattern seeking animal stuff that we're playing, I've played a couple of the songs so far. I played on a precision bass with flat wounds. Trying to get the Carol Kay kind of sound, and sometimes a Rickenbacker's the thing to use, and sometimes an active bass, so bass with active electronics. And I've never been a real fan of the good basses.
Okay.
I only own one bass that a equipment snob would consider even halfway decent. I've got one bass. It's a John Carruthers bass that I bought in about 1990 or 91. 5 string. It's got active electronics, and it's got kind of that sound. And I pull it on "These Are My Things." I use that bass on that song because I wanted something a sound that I couldn't get with. I generally stick to passive electronics, a little bit more old school stuff. But maybe, if I could just, here, you can have whatever bass you want and handed it to me, it might be like a vintage Fender of some kind. Um, I've got a lot of Fenders, and they sound really good, but just, there's something special about those really old ones. I don't know how they did it. They play really good, better than they should be able to. Maybe it's just because they're old and all worn in or something. I don't know. It's just maybe that.
Well, sir, that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, man, I loved your answers. Seriously, it was great. Great time.
You can always edit.
Ju- July 4th is the release of the incredible, and I'm telling you guys, incredible Pattern Seeking Animals. The first from many, I'm deeply hope. Thanks, Dave, again for doing this. So you've been wonderful, and looking forward to see you again in Quebec, Montreal, or even on the road.
Yeah, I hope we do get to do some live gigs because it would be great for us. Selfishly, it would be really great for us to go out and do it. And it was great to talk to you and see you again too. Hopefully, we'll make it up there.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.